Hey everyone, it's Daniel with DB Studios, and today we are going to do our first dive into Adobe Illustrator. So if this is your first time using Adobe Illustrator, I'm going to share with you just 10 tools / commands that you can use to be familiar with the program enough to produce amazing graphics. So let's get started. So here, I'm just going to go on a new canvas. The size doesn't necessarily matter. You can also change your units as well to inches if you'd like. I'm just gonna stick with pixels. Let's create it. So this is our canvas. On to step number 1, working with artboards. When you open your Illustrator, you may have a different layout. Here, you can change the layout based on your workflow. For me, I like having it on layout so I can have access to a lot of these various tools, which I will get into in this video, and some tools I'm going to save for a future video. Okay, first thing you need to know about layout is this button right here, document setup. So let's click here, and here's where you can go back and change the units just in case you didn't change it when you opened up the project. And we can go here on edit artboards. When we click edit artboard, we can always change the dimension of our artboard. We can pick the length, the width, and we can also, if we click on these different nodes, we can change how the board is to expand. So let's say I want to make the width 3000. It's going to use the middle as the expansion point. So if I hit 3000, enter, it's gonna expand that way. If I have this corner as the expansion point, it's going to expand from that corner. So let's put 3000 one more time. There we go. So it expanded from this corner, and so on and so forth. So this is good in case, let's say you import a PDF or any type of image, and let's say your artboard is not the right size. You can always manually adjust it by holding Shift and dragging on one of the corners. Or you can just manually adjust it without using the Shift key as well. And you can also drag and move your artboard. Here, you can also create multiple artboards as well. So what you have to do to create a multiple artboard is click somewhere else besides the artboard, click and drag, boom, and you get a new artboard. And you can keep doing this, so on and so forth. If you're working on something that's going to have multiple pages, this is a great thing to have multiple artboards set up in one project file rather than making many project files. So step number 2 is the pen tool. So as you may know, Illustrator is a vector-based program while Photoshop is a raster-based program. What that means essentially is that Photoshop uses pixels, many and millions and millions and millions of pixels to make up the image that you're seeing, while Illustrator uses a series of lines or vectors in order to create the image or create whatever your subject is. This is the best program to use if you want to create something that's vector based. So pen tool, if you click here, or you can hit P on your keyboard, you just simply click, drag, and you can just draw literally any shape that you want to draw. Or if I had an image here, I can even trace this image as well. This leads us to tool number 3, line weights. So line weights essentially is describing the thickness of the line. So if I click this shape that I just drew and I go up here to stroke, I can change the line weight here, or I can also change it by just simply clicking the arrows here, or I could just manually put in a number. Let's try 5. You can see that the line is way bolder and it's a lot thicker. So line weights is very good, especially if you want to make something pop out of the page, or you want to show contrast between two different objects. So let's say this is my main object and I have another object in here. Let's say this object, I want to bring less emphasis to it, so I can make the line weight a lot smaller. I can make it even half of 1.5, for example. Line weights is really going to be your best friend in terms of distinguishing different objects that you're drawing and bringing emphasis into one object in particular, or bringing emphasis into a particular object. But another thing that's really cool about the line weights, let's draw a line here, hold Shift. And if we click here and highlight this line, we can go to stroke And we can even add arrowheads. It's pretty cool. The size of the arrowhead is determined by the line weight. So if I have a bigger line weight, the arrowhead gets bigger. But let's say I want to make this thicker, but I don't want such a big arrowhead. So I could click, highlight the line, click back here, and you can even scale the arrowhead. Let's say I want this to be 40% of the max size. That way you can increase the line weight, but keep the scale of the arrowhead consistent. And you can even change the type, the profile of the line. Let's highlight this and let's change the profile from uniform to something like that. And this way we could get different variation in line thicknesses.
This leads us to tool number 4, line types.
So let's draw another line underneath this one. And what we're going to do is click the line, hold Alt while dragging, keep holding Alt. And now we made a duplicate. So now what we're going to do is to begin to change the line types. So if we click on this line and click on stroke, if you do not have stroke, all you have to do is go on Windows, navigate down and go to stroke, or hit Control F10 as a shortcut. So let's highlight this line and let's check this, dashed. So now we can start to make different type of dash lines. And what we're going to do is actually try to calibrate the size of the dashes and the space in between. So let's make this something like 16 and let's make the gap 8. Let's highlight that first, 16 and 8. You can see that it's a lot closer together now, because when you just have the dash and no gap, Illustrator will automatically assume that the gap is going to be equal to the dash. But there is many possibilities to the different line types you can make. For example, another one you can do is, let's activate this, highlight this line. First, we're going to reduce the line weight a bit. Highlight the line, and let's try something like this. So we're going to do 16. So it's going to be the inverse. And we're going to have a dot. And then we'll have another gap. Let's say something like 8. Now we have a line that's kind of like a dash, space, line, dash, space, line. And there's so many different line types that we can make like this. And let's say I want to change the edges of these lines. If you go here, you're under the stroke panel, and under weight, you look at the cap option, you could change the cap to round. Now we have a dash dot dash dot dash dot configuration. And there's many configurations that you can make similarly, and you can also begin to alter these corners as well too. And actually another interesting one that I really like is just the dotted line pattern. So here, let's go on something like 0.25, and the gap, let's make it something like 20. And now I just have a dotted line. Using these different types of strokes can help create a distinction in your lines, especially if you have a project where you have many lines running through a page, or if you want to have something that's showing something that's hidden behind an object. You can use different types of dotted or dash lines to indicate that. We're going to delete that.
This leads us to tool number 5, layers.
So just to create a new layer, you can go here and click the new layer icon. This is going to be helpful, especially when you have objects that are overlapping. And let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to select my rectangle tool, click the second layer, and we're going to draw it on this layer. Then we're going to click the first layer and then freehand it and draw a rectangle. As you can see, just having it on 2 different layers simply allows us to even begin to hide certain elements and just keep our files more organized.
This leads us to tool number 6, fill and stroke.
So when looking at fill and stroke, so what fill describes is the color within the shape or the object that you've drawn, and the stroke is the color of the border, so the edges that are used to define the shape. I can change my fill at any time by clicking the shape, click in here, and we can just change the color like this. And likewise, we could do the same with the stroke. So we click the shape, we click the stroke color option, and we can change the color to anything we want. Let's make it like a dark green. And we can just begin to change it like that. But let's say I want an object without fill, for example. All you have to do is click on the object, click fill to bring it to the foreground, and then click none to remove it. What this is helpful for is, let's say I just want the lines to be prominent. And now this is just going to overlay here, and it's going to be transparent in the middle. Likewise, let's say I just want the fill but no stroke. Let's say I want this edge to be basically clear. Click on the stroke and likewise click none to get rid of it.
And that leads us to tool number 7, the scissor tool. When you draw a line, the scissor tool allows you to split the line. So let me show you an example of this. Let's go on the fill tool. Say something like a burgundy will be nice. And now let's just draw this and fill up the entire artboard, just like that. So we're going to lock the layer beneath by clicking here. And now let's hold and click the rectangle tool, and let's click on the ellipse tool. So now we're going to click the color fill tool and let's change it to white. So we're going to hold shift and drag, then hold alt to make it expand from the position we clicked. Now what we're going to do is activate a new layer above this. And now let's click on the white circle we made and hit Ctrl C to copy. Then we're going to hit Ctrl F to paste it in place. So the difference between using Ctrl F and Ctrl V, when you use Ctrl V, you don't really have control of where Illustrator pastes the object that's copied onto the artboard. But when you use Ctrl F, it pastes it exactly from the original place where you copied it from. So without clicking anything else on the canvas, let's click layer 3, then let's click on object, arrange, send to current layer. This allows you to transfer an object to another layer once you've already drawn it on a particular layer. While the object is still selected, hit Alt on your keyboard, click on the corner and drag it. Let's make it about this size, and now we're going to go on the fill picker. Let's click on that. Maybe something like a yellow. Yes, this looks good. Let's make it just slightly smaller. And now we're going to make a fourth layer, and we're going to do the same thing. Ctrl C, Ctrl F, object, arrange, send to current layer. And also we're going to hit Alt and drag. Let's make the circle smaller. And now this time we're actually going to turn off the fill, and then let's click on stroke. Let's say a white. And now we're going to bump up the line weight of the stroke. Let's make it something like 20 pixels work. All we have to do is hold and click the razor tool, go down to the scissor tool. And now with the scissor tool, we're going to click on 2 points on the circle. We're going to click here, and let's actually click it somewhere there. Perfect. Now let's select the other piece, hit delete. Here we go. Now we have the egg yolk. Scissor tool is perfect for splitting vectors in order to create a nice little design, or really calibrate the length of certain lines, or trim into areas that are drawn, or if you want to subtract from a shape. Let's add some finishing touches. We're going to go over here to the stroke tab. We're going to click rounded to round out the edges. And with that, my friends, that's going to lead us to tool number 8, the text tool. So like any other program, you just have to click and drag to the appropriate size that you want your text box to be. And you can see inside the text box there are just some default characters, doesn't really say anything. That's just meant to occupy the space of the text box until you input your own text. Of course, you just click this flyout tab, change your font, change your text type, all these things. Your text bold or italics. And there's a paragraph layout for where you want your text to be on the page, whether it's the left, the middle, the right. But let's get into the cool things you could do with the text tool. So if you hold and click the text tool and you click type along path, you can actually get the text to be in the form of any path that we draw with the pen tool. Let me quickly demonstrate. So I'm going to click the pen tool and let's draw this path. So just a bit arbitrary. So let's turn off fill and let's turn on the stroke for the path, even though the stroke is going to disappear in just a moment. Once again, hold and click, go on type along path, and let's click on the path that we drew, and look, we can literally type along the path. We can even do it along the egg whites. But the thing is, when you do use this command, it's going to eliminate the fill and the stroke entirely. What I would do in order to get it along the egg whites, I would click Ctrl C, Ctrl F to paste in place, and then use the type along path tool to have my text going all around the egg whites, just like that. So this is going to lead us to tool number 9 and 10, blending tools and blending modes. Let's start off by using the blending tools. So I'm going to click here. Let's create 2 circles. We're going to make one circle bigger than the other. And let's change the color of the second circle. And let's overlap it just like that. So you can find the blending tool underneath the gradient tool on your toolbar panel. And now to use this, we're going to click over the red circle and then we're going to hold and drag it back. And there we have it. Now we just made a gradient without even having to go through the process of the gradient tool, having to change the color. It took all but just 2 simple steps. But let's talk a little bit more about blending mode. So we're gonna undo this. And let's click on this and let's drag the smaller shape, make it a little bit bigger. In order to really take advantage of the blending mode, similar to Photoshop, Illustrator actually have different blending modes that you can use to make certain objects that are overlapping one another have a degree of transparency or change colors, etc. In order to really activate this, we have to just click on the transparency tab. But let's say you don't have the transparency tab. Let's close this. So now we're going to go on window, scroll down to transparency, boom, we have it right here. Or it might be a floating window, just drag and dock it somewhere. So now we just have to select our objects and let's change the blend mode from normal to something like multiply. So now the color that's in the middle is a mixture of these 2 colors that's overlapping. We can also do this with lines. So let's create a new line. Let's actually make it maybe a blue color. Turn off fill, click the pen tool. Let's have our line run like that. So we can highlight the line and change the blend mode. Let's try something like darken. So as the line passes through the shape, the color changes as well. And if you play around with these settings, it's very helpful, especially if you have a ton of line running through your canvas and there's different shapes and you want one line that's passing through another shape to be popping out, or you still want it to be visible. These are 10 tools that you can use to really get started on Illustrator. More tutorials coming in the future that's going to dive into some of these different effects and all these different things, how to culminate it. So stay tuned for those videos and I'll see you all in the next one.